Okay, we are now presently recording. Again, wanted to welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming. I have muted everybody. If you could please keep yourself muted unless you're talking. That'll make for a better experience for everybody. If you're on a phone and don't know how to do that, it's *6 to mute and unmute. For today, I hope everybody's had an opportunity to read through the report that they received in the mail. We're here to answer questions, make sure that folks understand what the upcoming vote on April 10th means. I'm going to provide a quick general overview of the major changes, and then I'm going to introduce the members of the Charter Commission individually. I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about themselves, why they got involved, or why they're supporting decisions. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the timeline and what happens if the recommendations pass. And then we'll open it up for questions to everybody, if that works. And let's see. Okay, so just to give everybody a little bit of background, the Charter Commission operates under state law, and it's Mass General Law 43B, and that governs the formation, the responsibility, and the timeline of the commission. So back in April 2019, you may recall the town voted to elect us as the Charter Commission, and that started us on this 2-year process. It's important to note that it is the only process available by the state that allows a town to change its form of government, and that it is entirely in the process is entirely in the control of the voters. So I'm going to give a very general overview of the Charter Commission recommendations. If you haven't had a chance to look at the report that was mailed out, I strongly suggest you do. It gets into a little bit of further detail, and it not only gets into what we did, but why we did some of it as well. So to start, and the most important thing, a change in the Charter Commission recommended a change in the form of government from town meeting to town council, where voters will elect 7 at-large town councilors to serve on staggered 3-year terms, and they will act as the legislative branch of the town's government. We recommended that we keep a strong town manager who would be appointed by the town council, and they would run the day-to-day operations of the town. And that change consolidates the current combined executive branch power of the select board and the town manager into the town manager's position. And these changes also result in the elimination of the town moderator, since we no longer would have town meeting. Town council will act as the legislative branch, meaning they will vote on everything that town meeting currently votes on. They will review and vote on everything that has been voted on at town meeting, with the exception of things that were set by state law or are required to be put to the voters to decide specifically. They'll be able to address matters as they come up, as opposed to on a single night twice a year. And they'll be able to take as long as they need to discuss them. They can ask questions, they can get input from the public, and they can deliberate on them before voting. The current finance committee will be replaced with a standing committee of the town council, and that may include members of the public. Our recommendation provides the framework to create a Department of Public Works, where certain town departments, such as water, sewer, highway, things of that nature, would be consolidated into a single department. And under that, the town council would assume the policy and the rate setting authority of the Board of Public Works, but the responsibility of the day-to-day operations of the Department of Public Works would lie with a director, and that director would be appointed and report directly to the manager. And that eliminates the need for a separately elected water and sewer commission. So our recommendation also lays out a budget process that starts earlier, and it emphasizes clearer communication and collaboration across all of town government, including the town manager, the town council, and the school committee. The recommendations also establish quite a few new procedures for new direct citizen participation in town governance. And finally, it provides for a smooth transition from the current form of government to the new one by forming a transition committee. And that committee will provide guidance and direction during the transition to the new format and ensure that things kind of continue to operate effectively. In addition to providing a more accountable and representative form of government, we also feel it's a much more efficient one, since, as we noted before, the town council will be able to address issues and opportunities as they arise, instead of us having to wait until the next town meeting. We've been asked recently if we could provide examples of these gained efficiencies, and there's a good one that actually just came up recently. There was a situation that arose in a specific neighborhood where a bunch of residents went to the select board asking for something to be done to address speeding there. One of the practical options that was discussed was reducing the speed limit in that neighborhood. However, under state law, that requires the approval of the legislative branch, which, if you were listening to me a minute ago, you'll recall is town meeting right now. And while there is a town meeting scheduled for next month, the deadline to get an article on that warrant has already expired. So that particular remedy will need to be tabled until the October town meeting, and this is if the Charter Commission recommendations don't pass. However, if they do pass under a town council form of government, residents could present their case to town council just like they did the other night to the select board, and they could potentially have a vote on that matter as quickly as their next meeting. Residents wouldn't have to needlessly wait months to get a resolution to a public safety concern due to state law requirements. So at this time, what I'd like to do is to call on members of the Charter Commission to individually introduce themselves and then say a few words in support of their work and our recommendations. And if we could start with Kevin Schlecker Jr., please. Kevin, you there?
Yep, I was having a problem unmuting myself. I apologize.
No worries. I think that might be me.
So my name is Kevin Schlecker. I lived in town my entire life. I think one of the reasons why reasons I was interested in this the most, I think it was just a great opportunity for 9 of us to, sit down and study, any ways to make government more efficient. I think, when we all sat down, I think we all kind of had the same idea that we were all going to have open minds and we were all going to listen, and after meeting with, the entire, basically the entire town, whether it be, elected officials or appointed officials or, or hired employees, I think after studying and what we've seen over this long process and going back and forth was that we needed more efficiencies in government. We needed, to streamline things. We weren't keeping up with the demands as a town for the increase in technology, the increase of speed on things. So I think what I like about this plan that we put the thing, and obviously, unanimously we've decided that we should be switching to town council, is the fact that I think it's going to help the town of Norton with those things, with the speed of like Laura was just talking about, like simple things like that are going to mean a lot to the town. So I think what we put together, is it perfect? No, nothing's perfect. But I think for the town, for the voters, for the 20,000 residents here, I think this is a good package, and I think it allows us to fix some of the problems that we've been seeing with the town government.
Thank you. If we could move on to Sandy Allerhead, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Sandy Allerhead. I've lived in Norton for the last 12 years and been going to town meeting for pretty much those 12 years. And I just found that at any regular town meeting, it can be a little bit of an overwhelming process where there's usually around 30 articles we're trying to decide on in a single meeting. Whether you have a voter voice in each of those comes down to whether you're able to and available that one day when all those decisions are made. So, even when you go in researching every issue, you can still sometimes be caught off guard when someone brings up a point that hasn't been brought up before or tries to make an amendment on the town meeting floor. And so that when a decision is made that isn't in the best interest of Norton as a whole, the recourse is really just to bring it up at another town meeting and then hope that a different group of people show up. So I, joined this group just to try to see what other options there were. And as Kevin's, and Laura both spoke to, we all felt that town council provided a more efficient and more effective way of addressing the issues that are happening in Norton. And one of the things that was important to me, that if we moved to a town council, that was to build in opportunities for the public to give their input, as well as safeguards to overrule a town council if they were going against what the townspeople wanted. I feel strongly that the charter does create those safeguards and provides the accountability that's currently lacking in town meeting. So overall, I feel the town council provides more accountability, is more responsive to the needs of Norton, and gives a greater number of people in town a voice.
Thank you. If we can move on to Janie Goodwin, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janie Goodwin, and I've lived in Norton since 1998. And over the last, 5-10 years or so, I've really come to the conclusion that no matter what our background is, we all have a common goal. We all have common ground, whether we've lived in Norton all our lives, whether we've lived here since 1998 or just 2 or 3 years. We all want what's best for Norton, and that can be our common ground and our common goal. So that made me happy to really be a part of this process here and this commission. We knew 2 years ago that getting the formation of this commission was up to the voters of Norton, and you voted and entrusted us with the task of looking at our government and seeing if there are ways that we could make it more efficient as a whole in 2021. And I think that we have been able to do that. I echo all the things that Kevin and Sandy and Laura said, so I'll try not to be too repetitive. But I think that we've been able to do that with these proposed changes, and the changes are really a reflection of the concerns we've heard from citizens and concerns that we've held as well. So I support this charter 100%, because like the others stated before me, I believe it is more efficient. I believe it's more responsive, more accessible, and more representative for the citizens of Norton. So we're happy that you came out to ask your questions, and we hope that we can answer them all. Thank you.
Thanks, Janie. Let's move on to Dave Heaney, please.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Dave Heaney. I've been here in town for coming up on 8 years now, and was in West Bridgewater, another town with open town meeting for many years before that. And when I think of the drivers for me behind this charter, I think back to the open town meeting where we decided on the Leonard Street rezoning. And for those of you who were there, we started 45 minutes to an hour late because we couldn't fit everybody in the gymnasium. We had to bring in more chairs. It was a whole process. But as we were waiting for that, there was an elderly couple sitting right in front of me and my wife on the bleachers. And we had a very nice conversation. We disagreed on the major issue of the night. But before we got to the vote that night, they got up and left, right? They just couldn't stand being on the bleachers. They couldn't, they just weren't able to stay there until the vote, which is why I know they were there. And despite the fact that I disagreed with them on the vote, I didn't feel it was right that I got to vote that night and they didn't. And so I think when we talk about being representative and empowering voters, that really is what this charter does. And like everybody else, I wholeheartedly support it and am proud of the work that we did to get here. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Thanks, Dave. Let's move on to Denise Luciano, please.
Hey, sorry about that. Hi, my name is Denise Luciano. I've lived here for about 15 years. I got involved in the Charter Commission after just many years of increasing involvement in many town committees and just asking a lot of questions, trying to get informed before all the town meetings, which was very challenging and time consuming. And so I thought the best way for me to help out was to get involved. Be the change that you want to see. So I got involved in the Charter Commission, and I fully support the recommendations that we're making. I think, as you've heard us say before, we unanimously voted for the town council form of government. It was pretty easy to see that that was the right form of government for Norton going forward, to make us the most agile and able to respond to things happening in town in the fastest and most efficient way.
Thanks, Denise.
Yep.
Let's move on to Carrie Malloy Snyder, please.
Sure, thank you. So my name is Carrie Snyder. My family and I have been here for almost a decade, and we're really invested in the community. I started to get involved in open town meeting, and I've learned from those experiences. And importantly, I have the experience of being excluded from open town meeting due to a variety of other commitments. And so I became convinced that, we must be able to be more efficient. And so I ran for the Charter Commission. I went in without any preconceived notions. I just wanted to be part of finding a solution for the majority of Norton residents. And the thing I'd like to emphasize is that every member of the Charter Commission comes with different experiences and with a different perspective. And we didn't always agree on every single decision as we went through this process. What we did agree on was that town council form of government was going to serve the residents of Norton better than open town meeting. And while we disagreed on some things, I respect the decision of the commission. For example, I was one of the strongest supporters of precinct-based election of the town councilors. But I understand and respect the reasons my fellow commissioners, disagreed with me, and we decided to go in a different direction. And we moved on. We took the vote. We moved on to the next decision that we had to make. So I just want to impress upon everybody watching that this is a compromise document, and I truly wholeheartedly support it. I believe it is much better than what we have today. I believe it's going to give people more of a voice and more of a say in what happens in Norton. And so for those of you who don't like every single detail, I really urge you to look at it as a whole and understand that no charter can be perfect for everybody in Norton, but this is significantly better, and maintaining the status quo just isn't an option anymore. So, so I'm looking forward to answering your questions, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Carrie. We'll move on to David Wren, please.
All right, thank you, Laura. So my name is David Wren, as Laura mentioned. So I've been in town for 26 years. All my fellow commission members have just made all these great comments. So I'm not gonna, the drawback of having a name in with a W is you always go last. So I'll make it quick.
Sorry.
But I've been here for 26 years, and when we first moved to town, me and my wife, we tried to get involved in town somewhat, and went to some town meetings, and found it very, very frustrating. I recall one meeting where there was discussion about giving a town manager a $10,000 raise that went on for 2 hours. And then they immediately jumped into the school budget and they voted yes in approximately 2 minutes. And then an older gentleman jumped up and said, I just want you all to think about what you just did there. And then we went to a few other meetings, and then finally both me and my wife said, we just can't take this any longer. And pretty much cut it out for the next 20 years or so. And in the last 5 years, though, I've decided to get more involved. I got involved with the Zoning Board of Appeals, and then finally ran for a role on this commission. So, so that's kind of where my background comes from. I think the only thing I would just really want to stress is, I look at this document that we put together. To Carrie's point, it was certainly a compromise. But by the same point, though, I truly believe it's a long-term roadmap for this town in which to build its town government. And it's not magical. You need the right people in the right roles. So I really encourage people to look at it long-term. And and while it's not going to fix all the problems immediately, it does provide that roadmap. So. I hope that's how people look at it, and I really feel that it's the right map for the future of the town. And with that, I'll just thank everybody for coming out, and look forward to answering any of your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, David. All right, and I want to point out, David was not last, I'm last.
What's that?
So for those who weren't intimately following all of our meetings, and I can't say I blame you, I did want to give you a little bit of a glimpse behind the scenes at our process. At the outset, we set some very simple ground rules. Be open-minded to everything, hold off discussing any recommendations until we've finished the information gathering portion of our work. And that's a good 6 months. It was important that we maintain the integrity of the process. We were entrusted by the voters to do an incredible amount of research and due diligence, and that meant listening and not rushing to judgment. So, like I said, we spent the first 6 months reading our own charter. We read other towns' charters, both with a similar form of government and different forms of government. We met with the public, both elected and appointed officials and town employees. We conducted a survey that was open to all stakeholders, and we went into 2020 armed with all of that data. On the very first day of our deliberations, these were my comments to the commission. As we consider all of the following questions, know that we are not going to agree on everything. Fight for the pieces that are important to you based on what you've heard. And before you start digging in, you need to ask yourself, is this a deal breaker for you? And by deal breaker, I mean, will it cause you not to vote in favor of the recommendation? And a quick side note for those who don't know, a charter commission does not have to render a unanimous decision, and not all of them do. Those members who don't agree with the majority by law are allowed to write a minority report, and that report also has to be presented to the voters. So just wanted to quickly point out, we happened to render a unanimous decision, but they don't always, and they do not have to. So anyways, I asked the members to be thoughtful about which hills that they wanted to die on. And I reminded them, we're never going to satisfy everybody. It will never be perfect. No government is perfect. It just needs to be better than what we have. And we need to make sure it addresses the largest problems and the greatest number of people possible. At that point, we took an informal straw poll to see where we stood on that single most important decision that we wanted to make. And 9 independent people from various backgrounds and experiences, after 6 months of work, came to the same exact conclusion, that open town meeting was no longer working and that we needed a better option. We very quickly set aside representative town meeting because it was not the correct alternative. It did not even need to be addressed. It was that obvious to all of us. And so at that point, 9 members unanimously voted in favor of recommending a town council form of government to the voters of Norton. And I think I've mentioned before that this is the only way to change the form of government that's entirely in the hands of the voters. But it's equally important to note that it's an all or nothing proposition. There is no do-over. We can't make any tweaks and come back to you. Our commission ends 30 days from the election. So if you don't think town meeting is working, this will be the only opportunity to do anything about it for the foreseeable future. If our recommendations do not pass, then town meeting and everything, all of the problems that we've just identified in this 2-year process, those are going to continue. Now, on to some better news. If the charter passes, what happens next? What does that timeline look like? So on April 10th is the vote. Immediately following the passage of the charter recommendations, the transition committee is formed. The transition committee is made up of the select board chair, the charter commission chair, 2 members of the charter commission, 2 members of the FinCom, and the town moderator. I should also point out that they have the option to appoint somebody if they decide they do not want to sit on that committee, but I would expect everybody who's asked would. Select board will continue to serve until town council takes office in July. On May 8th, the final annual town meeting will be held, and we'll vote on the budget for the following year, along with another 30 articles or so. And then on a date in June that's to be set by the select board, there will be a special election held to elect a town council. On July 1st, the housing authority changes from an elected position to an appointed position. The incumbent members will complete the remainder of their term, and they are more than welcome to request an appointment to stay on that authority if they wish to continue serving. And then in July, the town council is sworn in. The town councilors will begin the transition process. And at that point, the select board, the water and sewer commission, and town meeting are all abolished. So at this time, I think we've talked enough. I'm going to open up the session for questions. I'm going to set a few ground rules if you just give me another minute. If I could remind you to keep yourself on mute unless you're actively speaking. And if you'd like to ask a question, we're going to try and use the raise hand function. If you're on Zoom, you're going to click the participants button at the bottom of your screen, and a window will open and you'll see the option to raise your hand there. When I call on you, just unmute yourself. If your name isn't identified in the participant screen, just state your name, please, just for the record. And then once your question's been addressed, just lower your hand using that same button when you're done, and we'll know we've addressed you. If you're joining us by phone, you can press *9 to let us know you'd also like to speak. Just again, kindly introduce yourself when I call you by your phone number. Another option, if you'd rather not speak, you can use the chat functionality. Again, that bottom button is at the bottom of the screen to type in your comments or feedback. And just note that you have the option to either send that chat to everyone, meaning everybody that's in this meeting right now, or if you wanted to direct it privately to the Charter Commission, please send it to Sandy Allerhead. She's going to be monitoring the chat questions for us. And there again, if I could also just ask you to state your name in the chat if it's not identified, that would be really helpful. What we'll plan on doing is taking one question from each attendee until everyone who wants to ask one question has had a chance, and then we'll come back around again. We will get to everybody. We'll stay as long as you need us to. If you have a follow-up question to the one that you've just raised, feel free to ask it. We just ask that you allow the commission to fully answer the question before your follow-up question. And just a reminder that this isn't a debate. We're very happy to provide rationale for decisions so that you can better understand how some of the decisions were made and how we got here. And we're very happy to answer questions about things you may not understand, be confused about, or how things are going to work under the new structure. So with all of that said, I would very much love to hear from anybody who has any questions. And I don't see any hands raised right now. Oh, I do. Looks like, hi, JJ. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, we'd be happy to hear from you, please.
Okay, hi, Jim Jardin. Been a resident about 10 years. I have a few questions actually, but I was just curious when the last time, if any of you know, Massachusetts town adopted a new charter to like this to go from town meeting to town council. Has that happened in recent years at all, or?
It has actually. The last one was North Attleboro, and they were 2 years prior to us. So when we were putting the question on the ballot to form the Charter Commission, North Attleboro was actually having their vote that we're having this Saturday coming up. And I think the one prior to that was Amherst in 2018, I believe. There were, I think, 10 towns in Massachusetts that I think within the past 10 years have made that change. Bridgewater was another one. Franklin was one. Barnstable was one. Somebody jump in if I'm.
So certainly not unprecedented.
Oh, absolutely not. No. And I should also point out we've actually been approached by 2 other towns who I will not identify at this time about the process and what's involved and specifics on how to go about doing certain things. So we are on the radar as, you know, charter commissions tend to be. I think we were encouraged by North Attleboro's, although we didn't know going into it what the outcome of their vote was going to be. But they also chose to move to a town council form of government. They moved from a representative town meeting and not an open town meeting. So that's one difference. And from what we understand, things are running very smoothly. They're actually they did a very different structure than we did. Their counselors are elected all at the same time. And they have nine of them flip every 2 years, which is much different. And, it's unique to them. And that's what they decided would be best for their town. We went a different way by having 3-year terms, staggered terms, so that it would be less disruptive and allow for better continuity of the government. But from what we understand, it's working very well. They have 12 people running for 9 seats, and I think 7 of them are incumbents in this election. So by all, obviously it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be things that we got to kind of work through and feel our way around. I think they've gotten through that process very well.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the question. All right. Who else has a question?
Laura, just in the chat, someone asked about the document that you were referring to, and I think that was meant the final report and final charter. So I did put them in the link them in the chat, but they are also on our website, the town website, under the Charter Commission page, and they were mailed out to every registered voter in town. I think there are paper copies as well at Town Hall if for some reason you didn't get that in the mail.
No, we strongly recommend taking a look at the website on our webpage on the town's website. In addition to that report and charter, has a lot of helpful information, talks a little bit about our process, gives you some answers to some questions that, if you hadn't had a chance to look at yet, you may get to them there. Any other questions in the chat? Oh, hang on. We have their hand raised. Christine DeVoe. Hello. If you could please unmute yourself and feel free to ask a question, please.
Hi, everyone. I just really wanted to see Laura and Sandy and Denise before tomorrow because one day every 2 weeks is not enough. But besides that, I did just have a question in regards to, just because it came up, like you said, with the speeding issue, and I heard it with Renee, the vice chair actually mentioned it, how they're not able to work outside of certain hours because that's a bylaw restriction. Are there any bylaws or state laws or any other restrictions that would cause a problem with town council addressing an issue right away? Because that's what I understand is the main problem. And I totally see it as well, that the town, like, we'd have to come to the select board, it has to be addressed, but something won't be able to get issued right away because it has to go to open town meeting. So I understand it's a long process, but I'm just wondering, does the town council format have some sort of workaround where it won't take that long to get issues done? Or are they also restricted by certain bylaws and state laws?
Sure, that's a great question. Thank you. So I think there's 2 different pieces to the question that you're asking. So when Renee was talking about things not being able to get immediately addressed, what she was referring to, I think a little bit, was open meeting law. And all town boards, committees, every public body is governed by open meeting law. And basically that states that everything has to be transparent and it has to be forward facing to the public, meaning any discussion regarding any matter that requires a deliberation or discussion or a vote by a public body needs to happen in public. So from that perspective, yes, so there is a delay in a select board and or a town council being able to address a matter until they have their next open town or their open meeting under open meeting law. Now, that being said, let's say there was just a town council meeting last night. They are not scheduled to have one until 2 weeks from last night. But they have decided that this is a sensitive or serious or concerning enough issue that they want to meet on it prior to the next meeting. All they really need to do is to post an agenda 48 business hours in advance, stating that they're going to hold a meeting and stating what the meeting is going to be about, and they could address it at that meeting. Now, with regards to the matter at hand, that is, so under our state law, with regards to roads that reside within the town, meaning they're not state-owned roads, in order to change the speed limit, it's set by state law that needs to be voted on by the legislative branch of government. Currently, our legislative branch of government is town meeting. And, in a perfect world, this has been brought up a month before our next town meeting. It would have been nice to get it on the next town meeting, but unfortunately, we have bylaws that set when the warrant article or the warrant is closed, and that means that no additional articles can be added to the warrant, and that's what is holding up this particular situation from getting addressed at this town meeting. So it's the bylaw that sets when the warrant is closed, and it's state law that states who can address the reduction in the speed limit. So it's a kind of a combination of a few factors that have impacted this particular situation. But under a town council form of government, if this were to arise, it just needs to wait until the next town councilor meeting. Like I said, town council could choose to hold a off-cycle meeting to address a situation they felt was serious enough or needed to be addressed quickly. And one other thing that you just also need to be aware of is town council cannot bring up a item to vote on and vote on it in the same meeting. It needs to span at least 2 meetings. So town council would hear from the members of the public in that first meeting. They could talk amongst themselves, they could ask questions, and then they could vote on it in the following meeting. So in an ideal situation, a matter such as that conceivably could be addressed in weeks as opposed to months. Does that help?
Yes, that helped a lot. I really appreciate the thoroughness of the answer too, because it seems there's a lot of reading, and I do love reading the fine print, but even so, you can get a headache sometimes. So that was one of the headache problems. So thank you so much.
You're very
thank
welcome.
and thank you all for all your work. Seriously.
Thank you. We
People
appreciate
don't
it.
understand it.
No, we're very happy to have new and younger people who want to be involved. So we appreciate your participation in wanting to get involved as well. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Laura, can I just add something to that real quick?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I know. I'm supposed to be asking other people if they want to say anything.
No, that's right. What I want to say is I think that just brings up a good point of like what some of the efficiency we're talking about. I kind of compare it to, in our jobs. If our jobs wanted to decide on something for the betterment of, of the place of employment or make a ruling on what they were going to do for, some type of business idea, that would be like them coming up with a great idea and then the business having to wait 6 months or maybe even a year because we can't make a decision right now. So like, that's what I kind of like. It's an easier way to think of it, in my opinion. Like, why are we waiting potentially 6 months or having to spend an absorbent amount of money on, calling a special town meeting to vote on things that we have to keep up with the times. We have to be able to move. We have to be able to adapt. And this allows the town to adapt when the important things come up. I'm not saying they're going to get voted on and everything's going to work out for everybody the right way. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that we can at least have a discussion. We can at least find out if it's the best thing for the town, and the council can rule on it and get these things moving instead of waiting 6 months or of spending an absorbent amount of money on calling a special town meeting. And I think it emphasizes what we were talking about with some of the efficiencies. It's very, very important that these things can start working in the system that frankly just don't work right now.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Does anybody else want to say anything? I said enough. Sorry.
We have another question in the chat.
Okay.
Our town currently has issues attracting candidates for various volunteer positions. What happens if 7 people don't run at first, or if seats remain vacant in subsequent years, and therefore we have no one to elect?
Sure. Let me open it up. Would anybody else like to address that question, please?
I mean, I'll say that the new charter does have a provision for filling vacancies. So it depends on how long in the term is left for that particular seat. And it leaves it to the town council to either call for a special election, put the issue to the next regularly scheduled election, or to appoint somebody to hold that seat for the remainder of the term. But it's very dependent on how much time is left.
And then I just wanted to add, I think we designed it to give, every situation is different and unusual. We wanted to give town council the most options available to address the specific situation for the vacancy.
I would also add to that I think, and I understand that the concern about not having people run for different positions. I do think, though, that town council is a bit different. It's maybe closer to a select board that we have now, where we really have never had a time, at least, I don't know, Kevin probably could answer this better, that I can't think of a time when we had nobody run for a seat at all. So sometimes they're not always contested, but right now, for example, we have 3 people running for 2 seats. So I think in terms of that the town council, I think that it would be a different type of board where we would hope to get people involved and interested in running.
All right, I will let whoever was in the chat let us know if that answered their questions. And thank you for the question. Do we have any other questions in the chat? Actually, the gentleman who asked the first question still has his hand raised, and I apologize. Was it Jim? John?
Yeah, Jim. No
Jim.
problem.
Okay, good. I had it right the first time. I apologize.
problem at
Your
all.
hand was still up. I wanted to see if we had answered all the.
I actually was kind of going to ask almost the opposite of what was just asked. What happens if you get 100 people that want to run?
Awesome.
If it gets voted, yes. How do you decide who ends up? You're not going to have a ballot with 100 names on it.
You will have a ballot with 100 names on it. They will be drawn randomly by the town clerk, and they will all appear on the ballot. Anybody who wants to run, who has pulled papers, who has gotten the signatures, can run. Anybody. Come on out.
What is the process to that?
It is literally, a debate with all of those is going to be probably a little challenging. Right,
but you mentioned signatures. Is it just a free for all? You sign up or?
No. So sorry, there is a process if you want to run, and I don't recall what the number of signatures. I'm going to say it's a number you probably need somewhere between 25 and 50. 50,
Yeah.
Thank you. Signatures, and it's basically nomination papers. You've got 50 people who have basically said, yes, this person, deserves to be on that ballot, and can be any rights, just has to be a registered voter. Nomination papers, they'll announce the date that they're available. They'll announce the date that they are due back. They will announce the date that you have to withdraw them by, or else your name will be on that ballot. And they will all be listed on the ballot.
Will the current sitting select board members be on the ballot also?
No.
Or they still do the same process?
They have to go through the same process. It's a completely different board. So the select board,
they won't by default just be on the ballot.
No, select board currently is the executive branch. The town council is the legislative branch. So it's a little bit different. There are common responsibilities. I would expect some members of the select board may have an interest in running for town council. They don't have to, they may not, and it's completely up to them, but no town council, nobody is guaranteed a seat. Anybody can run. It's a free for all. Come on, it'll be fun.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for your question again, Jim.
And Laura, we do have other questions in the chat.
Okay.
We have, I think it usually comes down to money that drives people's decisions. Would the town council be able to vote yes on the $40 million override?
Really good question. Thank you. No, this is a question that we've been fighting since like almost day one. There's some misinformation that the Charter Commission was elected so that we could push through overrides without having to go to a vote. And that is 100% untrue, 1,000% untrue. By state law, a Proposition 2.5 question, and a Proposition 2.5 question is an override, a debt exclusion, or an underride. I know it's hard to believe that towns actually vote on underrides, but they're out there. And it all falls under Proposition 2.5. By state law, that question has to go to the ballot, to the voters every single time. Town council has no control over that. So thank you. And I hope I answered your question. And if not, feel free to follow up in the chat. Anybody else have anything else to add to that?
Just to even expand on that a little bit, I think that's a great example of the overall idea that nothing we do in the charter, whether it's this charter or any other, can override state law in any way, right? And that is the example that is most near and dear to people's hearts and their wallets. But this is all done consistent with state law, and that's just one great example of it.
And I'm going to piggyback off of that and also state that even matters that are that the town council has the authority to vote on, they always have the option to put a particular question to the voters for a ballot vote. And it doesn't necessarily matter what it is. It could be something where they are split amongst themselves and can't come to a decision. They decide to leave it up to the voters to decide. It could be something that was fairly controversial and they feel that a town vote is necessary, but they do have the discretion to put questions to the voters in a ballot. So thank you.
All right, another question came in. Oh, just lost it, sorry. Why not change the bylaws to address those timing issues instead of throwing out the one person, one vote process? So I think that's going back to the bylaws that some of the issues we talked about with timing.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly when that came in, what we were talking about, but just to sort of, I guess, my general answer for that would be that the timing issues that we talk about with town meeting is, aren't really solved by bylaw changes. The fact that you have 2 town meetings a year typically. You can have special town meetings, but it's a very cumbersome process versus the town council, which would be meeting probably a couple times a month at least, and be able to vote on an ongoing basis, as opposed to, again, waiting until a town meeting to make, as we're doing this upcoming town meeting, 30 decisions in one night. So those votes would take place over, as they came up over the course of the year. And you could at this point be talking about budget and kind of focusing on the budget. And then when that issue or when that is resolved, then you could get into other votes and other things that are such as the things that are on the town meeting warrant right now.
If I could also add to that, a bylaw change also requires right now town meeting vote. So you don't necessarily have that change at your disposal under our current form of government. However, it is important to note that under a town council form of government, now correct me if I'm wrong, am I wrong? Town council can vote on bylaw changes, correct? They don't need to go
Yes.
to a, yes, okay.
Yes.
So I was heading in the right direction. So under the town council form of government, if a bylaw change is needed, it simply requires a vote of the town council, which we've just explained can happen over the course of literally 2 meetings, could be in weeks. As opposed to right now, we can't get anything on the warrant for the upcoming Maytown meeting to change that timeline. And so it would have to wait until October, and then that needs to be voted on by town meeting. So it's a whole kind of vicious circle there.
And I think,
Anybody else?
I think she followed up on that too, just to, yes, it was about the timing street issue. Why can't we change for more town meetings per year? Is it an expense issue?
I don't know. So any open form of town meeting, I think by law has to hold one open town meeting per year. Many towns will tend to have two, depending on their size and the number of matters that are being addressed within the town. But some will only hold one and try and get all of their business done once a year. Some will hold their spring town meeting as the budget meeting, and then the fall town meeting is generally reserved for other matters. We tend to handle all matters at both meetings. But with regards to, I think the only other option is to call for a special town meeting. And the select board or the town manager could choose to do that, to have certain things addressed in a more timely manner as opposed to waiting for the next town meeting. But there are also rules and timelines associated with that. It has to be done so far in advance. There's also a warrant for it. It's not as quickly as we can go to town council next week and get that resolved. I don't remember, somebody can jump in off the top of their head if the amount of days notice they have to give for special town meeting. Anybody recall? It's not quick.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number, but suffice it to say, there are significant logistical hurdles to regularly running town meetings on a, you wouldn't be able to run town meeting on a bi-weekly basis for any issue that happened to come up.
No. Can you imagine trying to get the entire town to come to a meeting every 2 weeks?
Yep.
We can't get them to come every 2 years, every twice a year. So hopefully that answered your question, and thank you for that question. What else have we got?
Okay, next question. Does town council have sole control over appropriations of overrides after the first year?
So not after the first year. So once the voters have decided to approve an override, town council has the authority to appropriate the funds for the override or appropriate the borrowing associated with the debt exclusion.
I think it's more, if I'm reading the question correctly, it's more for general overrides. So in terms of a debt exclusion, it has to be used for that specific, whatever the debt exclusion was listed for. But for a general override, I think the first year we do typically say this is what the override is for.
I'm following it now. Go ahead.
But yeah, after that, it becomes, those items become part of the regular budget and part of the regular budget process. And so the appropriations would be decided by the town council.
Actually, can we go back on that one, Sandy?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. What was it?
No, you were just saying it would be decided by town council, but in subsequent years, so that money is now in the budget. It's not necessarily just town council that just they appropriate the money, but in terms of deciding where it goes, that's more of a town manager.
Right, it's the same budget process as a normal year.
Okay.
The regular budget process, correct.
Okay, sorry, just wanted to clarify.
Want the next question?
Yes, please.
I think actually it was back. So there was a question about whether this is a one-way street that we can't go back if it's not working as envisioned.
Does anybody, I'm going to stay quiet because I've been talking way too much. So somebody please take that. Not everybody at once.
No, it's not a one-way street. So just like we, the town elected a charter, us as the charter commission to change the form of government, the town could do that again. And change the form of government. The other thing is you can make more minor changes through different processes. So for some of them, if you wanted to, for example, expand the number of town councilors, you could go to the legislature. The town council could request a special act from the state legislature. If you wanted to make even more minor changes in the charter, you could do that through the town council, and then I think at the ballot, and the voters could vote on more minor changes. But any change to the form of government or the way the town councilors are elected, I think would need that extra step of either a charter commission or a special act by the legislature. But it is absolutely, the town can change their charter as they wish. They just have to go through the appropriate process.
Anybody else have anything to add? Okay. Thank you for the question. I hope that answered it.
Okay, we have another question. How do people control the council? I'm not sure if that means vote for the council. How do 7 people remain truly representative of everyone? And why do we choose 7 members? Is that enough for more comprehensive representation?
Okay. So in terms of the number, there is no real right answer. I think we were looking at as few as 5. I think we were looking at as many as 9 to 11. It needs to be an odd number. I think we ultimately decided 5 was too few and 9 was probably too many. We did look to other towns, but again, every town is different. You can't really go by population size. There was no easily identifiable system. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. There was nothing easily identified, no pattern. There we go. Where populations of this many people to this many people generally go with this. It was all over the board. So, going by what other towns do didn't really work. A lot of our decisions, we just had to go by feel, and does this feel right for Norton? And we ultimately decided on 7. And what was the other part of the question?
So is it enough for comprehensive representation? Control is, and they make sure that they truly represent everyone, majority, and not a special group.
Got it. Okay. So I think by choosing to have them at large allowed for what we felt was the greater chance for representation. Anybody who wanted to run in any election could do so by having all at large seats. And then in terms of, control, the control is by the process of the voters. I think, during an election process, there's quite a bit of information that's flying around in terms of, who people are, what they represent, what their intentions are. And I would trust them. And our precincts are set up so that they are all approximately equal in population size. So it's not as if any one precinct has a advantage over another. It's it's all relatively equal. So
Yeah, I would just add to that, there are a number of ways that people can continue to make their voices heard, whether that is mechanisms where we have time for public comment at literally every meeting. It is a required standing agenda item that the town council must allow members of the public to speak if they want to. There's a number of processes ranging from being able to force the council to vote on something all the way up through recall, right, outside of the actual elections if they're not representing the town as they should be. And then also, aside from the very first election, we are never electing more than 3 town councilors in any given election. So it's not with town meeting, you can have everybody who cares about something show up for one meeting and make a decision. With the town council, given that you can't install a majority in any one election, you don't have that option, right? You need to be able to elect your candidates in multiple years over time, and that in and of itself is a safeguard against not having that representation.
Just want to add one more thing to it. I think
Sure.
one of the most important things about the system that we're talking about here is that the whole idea is to get 7 people that are going to pay attention. And I'm not saying that everybody's not paying attention, but you're going to have 7 people that are highly involved, that are following the stuff that's going on day to day in the town, and that are voting on things. And when they vote on things for, whether or not, it's something like the speed limit thing, or whether it's something to do with the budget or whatever, their vote's going to be known during that meeting. So either by the voters going to the meeting, by the voters, if it's still on Zoom, if they have to read the minutes, they're still going to be able to follow, where the council is voting and what they're voting for. And in turn, the so-called control comes into is, as voters, if we don't like how that person's representing the 20,000 people in this town, or the almost 14,000 registered voters, where is our control? Well, our control is that they're not looking out what's for the best interest of the town, and we can vote that person out. If they're doing what we believe is the best, the voters should speak their mind through the ballot and vote the person back in. And I think that's in some ways, we're missing that right now in the system that we have. And what I mean by that is, and let me try to explain it the quickest way possible, is that the Board of Selectmen by default can, unfortunately, they can always rely on the town meeting. So for instance, if a matter comes up, if I'm on the select board, I could really just stay silent about it, correct? I could just really not have any opinion. I could really play both sides of the fence. I could play both sides of the voters. And then I could just go to town meeting, wait for a special interest group to walk in, vote on whatever it's going to be. And the people voting really have no idea where you really, have the idea. And I think that's been kind of shown in the last several years when, long-term members of the select board have been voted out, and some of them and new members have been coming in. I think that people are understanding what we're talking about by that is that, you can't just keep relying on town meeting, and unfortunately, I think with this newer system, or the system that we're going to go to, it's a great avenue for voters to see exactly where the council stands on matters, because it's going to be a very public vote. It's going to be very recorded, and they're going to have to say yay or nay on these things. And if we don't like them as voters, we don't like the decisions they're making for the voters, then that's our control. Our control is that we get our neighbors, we get our friends, we get our fellow voters, and we go in there and say, you're not doing what the best interest of the town. And I think that's much more control, far more control than what we have of a special interest, so a group coming into town meeting and saying, yeah, we don't want this. Well, is it the best idea for 20,000 people? It may very well be. We know for a fact that this town has let things go by in town meeting that have been probably very good for the very vast majority of people. And yet 75 to 80 people have walked in and put those ideas down because, it affects them, and that's how they voted. And I understand that. It just may not be what's the best for the town moving forward and for the future.
Anybody else have anything to add?
I see Christine's hand. Is that backup, or was that?
I think hers was down, so that must be a new question.
It is, if you don't mind.
No, not at all.
Okay. So when just because Dave opened up this door, sorry, Dave, for the public participation in the, section 7-2. So where it says there's a set time limit by the town council rule. Is there a minimum that it has to be? Because I feel like, a lot of people love the fact at open town meeting that they can just go up and say whatever they want for however long about any issue. And I feel like that's definitely something that people are going to miss. But is there a minimum that they have to at least say, like an hour or something? I'm not sure if that's anywhere in this.
No, so in looking at 7.2, again, when designing the charter, we were directed by the attorney to, not make it too prescriptive, and that it should allow for the broadest options available and still be functioning. So where it says a period of time, it doesn't state the amount of time that has to be made available. I think that would be up to the town councilors at the particular meeting. I think it would depend upon the number of people who wish to speak. I think if, there were 10 people and they all wish to speak, the town council would be within their right to say, we'd like to kind of, limit this, maybe everybody 5 minutes each. But it is at their discretion. But it has to be allowed at every single meeting. If there is only one person who wishes to speak and they need 15 minutes and town council feels that they are making a compelling presentation and they want to hear more, they can certainly allow it. I think it's the discretion of town council.
Laura, do you mind if I jump in?
Please.
And I would just say, so currently our current charter does not require this, and open meeting law doesn't require this. So this is something that we have added into our charter. I would also add that the town moderator actually does limit how long people can speak at town meeting. And currently the chairs of all the boards do the same, because you have to allow the specific board to have an orderly meeting. And so this is normal to let it be decided by each individual board or council. But I just wanted to say that the town moderator does routinely, limit people to 3 minutes, and you can cut off debate at some point. So it's not sort of unlimited.
Thank you.
All right, that answers. Okay. Were there other questions in the chat, Sandy? Because it looks like Jim is raising his hand again.
Okay, can we go to this one first in the chat?
Sure.
I think it's a quick one. How would council process be different from what we have now for adding a sports complex to the much needed public town hall and senior center? And so I think that's referring to, again, the debt exclusion. And again, that's, just like the select board chose what was going to be on the debt exclusion, town council would choose what items were going to go to the voters. But once again, it would have to go up to a vote of all the Norton voters, registered voters in Norton. So that part of the process really doesn't change from what we have right now in terms of, still having that opportunity to go to the ballot and vote individually about whether you support the projects, together, apart. The debt exclusion, that's up to their discretion as to how they want to present that. And then it's up to the voters about whether they want to approve that as the package has been presented.
Hi, Jim. You're up next.
Okay. I was just wondering what kind of access the public will have to the council members outside of these meetings. Like if there's not a meeting and you wanted to speak to one, can you go make an appointment at town hall, or how would that work?
Sure. It would work a lot, similarly to the way it works right now with the select board. So they would be assigned town email addresses. That would probably be the recommended way to get in contact with them. If they chose to, if you wanted to address something with them, I would recommend email. I've seen, on social media where they've been tagged into certain discussions on particular groups. It's always an option. I think you have a better chance of getting your specific question answered or needs addressed by email. The town councilor, has the option to reach out to you. You can speak by phone, you could speak in person, if you needed to have them come and see something in particular. So that would be the process.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Anything else we could answer for folks?
Yeah,
Are we doing okay in the chat?
I think there's a follow-up. How would we be getting involved in adding or not having been added? I think that again refers back to the sports complex being included as part of the town hall senior center. And again, I think it would be the same process as now, where they had the permanent building committee had several meetings to discuss what would be included, and that any of those meetings are public and open to the public, where people can express concerns, reach out to members of any of the committees, and the town council. They would reach out to their town councilors and express what they would like to see on the debt exclusion. So very similar to what is, I think, the process now of getting involved and going to meetings and reaching out, and that would I think that's what that the question meant.
Yeah, we should also, people who may not be familiar with the way things work in terms of, so when town council or the select board is having a meeting, they will post an agenda. The agenda has to list all of the things that they expect to address within that meeting, especially if there's things that they're going to be voting on. And then certain things that they're voting on actually require a public hearing. So there would be a notification separate from the agenda announcing that as well. So we would ask people that wanted to be kept abreast. Best way of doing that is to check the agendas for the town council, and they would be meeting on a regular basis. Any other questions that we've got? Anything else in the chat?
I think we addressed everything in the chat. Unless if I missed something, someone please post it again. But I think we caught everything. Oh, there's.
Looks like Deb has another follow-up question.
Oh, will the notification process change? That one?
Yeah, and I would just say that the charter is not supposed to dictate every minor detail, so that will be left up to any additional notification outside of what is required by open meeting law would be up to the town. And I will say that in our report, we did note that people really wanted more communication. And so I do think that that's something that the transition committee is going to be dealing with should question 1 pass, because one of the things we did here was that people wanted more communication. So I think that's going to be high on the list, but it's not something that would have been included in the charter specifically.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, again, as Laura said earlier, that any decisions, would have to be discussed at a prior meeting. So maybe you missed it on the first meeting when it was first discussed, but certainly, if you heard about it afterwards, they wouldn't have voted on anything at that meeting. So you would still have an opportunity to be heard, to email your counselors or reach out to them in whatever way, or go to attend a meeting so that you could give your input before the final vote happened. It looks like we do have another question in the chat, Laura.
Okay.
Thank you for holding the session. This session is helpful. I believe several town meeting proponents have invited Charter Commission members to a friendly debate of the issues. Is that going to take place? I think a lot of undecided voters would love to see that take place because this is such an important decision.
Did they say proponents or opponents?
Town meeting proponents, people who
Are in favor of the Charter Commission recommendations?
No, people who want the town meeting to stay.
Oh, town meeting proponents. I see. Got it. I was confused. All right. So the question was, thank you for having a session. Is a no. A debate is unfortunately not going to take place. So the issue that we have is that the Charter Commission, is here to answer questions, explain to you how things are supposed to work, how things will impact them. Within our process, there was a preliminary report that was issued, and we were required to hold a public hearing. At that time, We received a lot of information, took in a lot of information, and were asked a lot of questions about, had we considered this? Why was things done this way? Had you considered an alternative? Can this be changed? And then the Charter Commission, after that public hearing, had another meeting and talked about everything that we heard within the public hearing related to our preliminary report. And we went through and made some tweaks. We changed a few things. We adjusted some wording, and we did actually adjust some specifics within the charter based upon that. At this point, the decisions are made. The time for debate is over. We can't change anything. We can explain the rationale, but we are also hindered by the fact that we can't really, we're not really supposed to be, campaigning on our behalf. We can ask for your support. We can tell you to go out and vote. We can tell you what our decisions were. But we're sort of hamstrung in getting into a debate after the fact. I don't think it's a useful. I don't think it's a useful mechanism for pushing forward our message at this point. Would anybody else like to comment?
Just like to say, I think the voters, have seen, obviously, their side of it. They've done, their video, they've put out their information on what they're going to put out. And I also think that we've been beyond transparent about what we're putting out. I mean, we've had, several of these, we've been open. Obviously, anybody could attend our meetings. I think this process, I mean, given the fact that during COVID also is obviously, unfortunate, but we've been extremely transparent to this whole thing. I think people have could follow the process from the very beginning on what Laura was talking about with some of the ground rules we set, with some of the things that we spoke about, through some of the debates we've had. I mean, hours and hours of meetings, and I know some of them got long and drawn out, but I think there was a very good reason behind that. You know what I mean? We went through a very long discussions about certain ideas. And I think at the end here, what Laura is saying is that, we have a product that we debated on, that we talked about, that we came together as 9 people. We didn't always agree, but we came out with a plan that we believe is going to benefit, the most people in this town to move us forward. And I think, sitting and down with the other group, while, we may be getting a good argument with them, and we may be, misunderstanding on a lot of things, I don't think it changes the process that we went through. I don't think it changes on the face value of what type of product we have here, and that people can make their decision based on, the situation, the plan we have right now. We have open town meeting. How government works right now because we're living in it. You know what I mean? And if you don't like it, and it's something that you're having a problem with, I think, looking at what we're putting out gives you a way to change it, or a way to at least move on forward. And I think, on its face value, that's what we're here for.
If I could also just, I think we've made reference to it before, just to remind folks that back in 2003, the select board chose to form a town government study, and they appointed 5 people or residents from the town to undertake a year-long process and come back with a recommendation at that time, and they did. And they came to the same conclusion. They also recommended a town council form of government. The select board at the time decided to put it up to a vote to voters under a non-binding ballot question. And at that time, this is in 2005, excuse me, that also passed. And voters in town decided that it was a good recommendation, and we should look into moving forward with changing to that town council form of government. Within the study, the committee had also provided a path to do so via a legal opinion from the town attorney, and that would have gone through the legislative option that Carrie had referred to previously. It's not entirely certain whether the state would have accepted that, but by having the town vote in acceptance of it, it likely would have passed as well. Just so folks are aware.
And I just wanted to say that we do advocate that, you know, you vote yes on question one. We've taken a lot of time and study to come up with our recommendation. But a debate is more political, and we're not a political group. There are three, you know, pro town meeting political groups and one pro charter, you know, new charter political group. So the debate is really more appropriate among those groups rather than with us.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions, Sandy?
No other questions or some comments. I am going to save the comments just so everyone knows. So forward those along. I think, you know, that if the charter does pass, some of these are really good things for the transition committee to consider. How to, for example, make things more to Deb's point, more known to the general public, how to get the word out for different notices and that type of thing. I think those are all great suggestions, which to Carrie's point, you know, it's not really something we can include in the charter, but it's absolutely something that a transition committee could discuss and come up with ways to make sure that everybody in town is really informed about what's happening.
Yeah, you know, we want it to be more accessible. We want it to be more transparent. We want to engage residents. We want to engage participation, not only in volunteering to be on a board or committee, but we want to, you know, encourage people to attend these meetings. They're open. You have every right to, you know, when we actually get into meeting in person again, but every single agenda tells you where to find that meeting, and you have every right to walk into any one of them that you want to. You know, we are hoping that this kind of energizes, invigorates the residents and makes them want to get more involved and, you know, to demand more from their government. So, thank you.
I think there's one more quick question about how the transition committee is selected, and that's Laura. Would you want to go through your list again of who's on that?
Yeah, sure. Hang on, I'm going to pull it up really quick just so I have. It's a cheat sheet. Sorry. So it is set by the charter. So I think it's section 9 of the full charter. It lays out what the transition process is if the charter passes. So made up of, in the transition committee, it is the select board chair or their designee, the charter commission chair or their designee, 2 members of the charter commission, 2 members of the finance committee, and the town moderator or their designee. I hope that helped.
And yes, that's section 9, right, Laura? You
Yeah.
said 9, yes.
Yes, I'm almost positive. I've got them almost all down by heart now. It is section 9. Section 9 overall addresses all of the transitional provisions within the charter.
So just like, I just want to add one more thing to that too, is like, for instance, just some of the examples that I could probably think of, like knowing that if this went through, how obviously important town council would be. You know, when the town council was elected and they were setting some of their rules and guidelines of when they were going to meet, you know, we would assume that it would be something similar to, you know, if they were meeting, say, for instance, once a week or meeting every other week, that would be a set day and a set time. So it wouldn't be something that you were waiting, you know, possibly to hear. Obviously, you would be seeing agendas and you know, following open meeting laws. But for instance, you know, a Thursday at 7 p.m. every other week, or a Thursday at 7 p.m., you know, every week. So you have an idea at least on when it. So there's people that aren't connected. And I understand people that aren't connected to their phones every single minute, or they're not on social media, would still have an idea that, hey, these meetings fall on these dates. They've kind of set the, you know, the groundwork of what they're doing. Obviously, it's, you know, to be changed and, you know, to be determined, but that would be the kind of basis which would allow some of the people that aren't connected to understand, you know, where the meetings are taking place and when.
Do we have any other chat questions, Sandy? Oh, hang on, somebody's got their hand raised. I can't see it. I see one at the bottom that there's a hand raised, but I don't see who it is.
Oh,
Am
that's
I
just
just
me
not
again.
scrolling?
I'm here to bother you. I'm so sorry. It's just Christine.
No, that's why we're here. It's the whole point of it.
You know, it seriously has been really helpful digesting everything too. So when I first read this, my biggest thing, I saw it and I was like, where's the representative town government? And Carrie kind of mentioned that you guys had brought that up, and I just wanted to hear from people who wanted like a representative town council, like to be represented by precincts. What was their reasoning behind why they wanted that? I obviously that's not what's happening, but I just wanted to hear other people's opinions as to what they thought.
Sure. Carrie, you want to start?
Sure. So I felt like it would make it easier for people to run if they were running within their precinct rather than townwide. But you know, there are pros and cons to both, right? And I think we can send you the dates of the discussion that we had on that. It spanned, I think, 3 meetings, Laura, is that right? 3 or 4
discussions.
meetings. You know, and it was
I
the
can
most
pull them up.
heavily it was the most heavily discussed issue, right? To figure out how we were going to elect the counselors. So that was one of my reasoning. You know, I thought that breaking it up into precincts and having one from each precinct and then a couple of at large to balance it out would be a better way to go. But you know, the way we decided to go, I'm perfectly happy to try it. We can always change it in the future if we decide that at large isn't working. And ultimately, you know, it's what is going to work best for Norton. The comments that we received were largely we want at large. So that's what we went with, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that works out.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well, because I was a big advocate of the by precinct as opposed to at large. And my general thought process was that I believed it was a little more representative in terms of allowing people to run within their districts. I thought it would be a little more invigorating and hopefully motivate more people within their districts. I also thought that it would be a nice idea to, you know, there's nothing wrong with having someone from your district represent you and your area or town and your concerns, and mixing those with 2 at large could have been a very representative way to elect the counselors. I also was concerned, you know, members in the commission, we talked about the pros and cons, and there certainly were pros and cons to both, like Carrie said. And, you know, one of the biggest cons to by district that I saw, by precinct, excuse me, that I saw was the ability to not elect someone for, you know, I forget what the number was. I think it was every 3 years, maybe you from a specific district, because the way they were staggered, weren't actually voting for someone. And maybe someone can help me out with those years, but I think it was 3 the way they were staggered. I can't quite remember. So not every year or not every time some seat was up, you would be running. It would be, I felt like it would get kind of a bit convoluted in terms of when people from districts are running. So that was definitely a con to that. And I saw that, and just, you know, at the end of the day, we voted, and for me, I voted for district, but it's a piece that I was willing to, certainly not going to throw out the whole charter for it that way. I still think that at large has its cons, and its benefits, excuse me, and I still support that.
Thanks.
I think there's a question from Deb about limiting it to no more than 3 from a certain precinct. We did talk about that, but it got really complicated with the staggering terms. I think we felt that the staggered terms were important in terms of not having to vote for 7 people all at once every single time. I think that to me is just overwhelming. And I think that once we had the staggered terms and we started looking at what that would look like to try to limit people, how that would work, and all the language involved in that. And I think actually Kevin brought up a great point about just in general, but we're trying to encourage more people to run, not limit people from running. And so that conversation definitely happened and came up. We discussed it, and I think logistically it wasn't something that ended up being feasible.
Yeah, and to add to that, Sandy, another point that you just made in terms of the district versus the at-large, one candidate could get, you could lose a very good candidate for town council, someone who is going to be very good for Norton in a seat because their district, they're not running for the district, or maybe they didn't get as many votes as someone from another district. So you could lose very good candidates that way. And I think that someone had mentioned that at the start of this meeting, that, really trying to invigorate people and getting them to run and getting good people in these positions who, in these council positions, who are really thinking about the betterment of Norton. And I think that was one of the cons, is that you can lose some really good candidates that way.
I think we also felt that in general, again, like Laura had said before, if we stagger the terms that way, that you wouldn't necessarily, it's not like, okay, there's something happening in my backyard, in my precinct, let me try to stack the council with everybody from my neighborhood, from my precinct. I think we because there's only at most 3 people running in a given year because of those terms, there's not a lot of issues that are happening over a course of 3 years where you could turn over the entire council to a certain precinct. And we kind of looked at the precinct representation in terms of the other boards and committees, and saw that it wasn't, was never really all one, even planning board, for example, where they are voting on things in specific areas. I don't think we see everybody from a certain precinct all joining the planning board at the same time. So again, because of the staggered terms, that really makes it more challenging to really get that majority vote of everybody from on a certain issue.
And one thing too is I think with obviously any of these systems, whether it's open town meeting or with council, it relies on the voters, right? It relies on input. It relies on people willing to take the positions, willing to run for the positions, willing to be voted into the positions. But it also takes for the voters that come out and cast their vote. So when we hear things like, well, are people going to be, from one precinct running for these 7 things? Well, is that a possibility? Yes. But it's also on the voters to see what these council are voting on, what their ideas are, what they're running on, what their so-called campaign's going to be for the betterment of Norton. And it's going to be relying on the voters to come out and say, yes, we like these ideas, and we want you to hold them when you go into them, so you can vote on these certain things. And we're going to be watching how you're voting on things and how what you promised or what you stated in your campaigns, if you're going to be holding to those things. I think that's on the voters. That's on the voters to see, what we're comfortable with a town on allowing 2 people to run from a precinct. So, and again, I was one of the ones that was, me and Kerry, I think, very from the beginning, we had some real, back and forth on these type of things with the precincts and at large. I think we all did. I think we obviously, we spoke about it for hours and hours in meetings. I think it was obviously good, and we were very respectful, obviously, of each other, and there was so many great points on both sides of it. There was so many things that somebody would bring up, and even though I was a very big proponent of having at large, somebody would say something about precincts, and I would say, geez, that is a great idea. But in the end, I think we can all kind of agree with it, is that I think the pros outweighed some, the pros for at large outweighed things. And I think we understood that the way the voters came to us, the way some of the surveys worked out, that we wanted something that was, the person was going to go in there, whoever's going to run for council, whoever's going to be elected to be in that position, was going to have what the best interest of 20,000 people in town. And that's why, in my opinion, why at large was so important, is that we wanted to get away from this, not in my backyard, not these, special interest groups coming in and making decisions for the town. We wanted is what is best interest for the town. That may not be happy for everybody. It may not be, the best thing for the certain people and certain ideas, but what's best for 20,000 people? And I think this way and what we're trying to put forward here does that. It does that in a best way possible under the, parameters that town council type of government has.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm actually typing right now. So I did look it up while we were talking. I posted the dates and the timestamps in which the precinct and at-large discussions took place. And you can find those on Norton Media Center's channel on YouTube. Do we have any other questions, Sandy?
I don't think so. I think I see some comments, but I don't see any questions. Oh, address for the YouTube channel. Do you have the link to the YouTube channel, Laura?
Yep. Give me 1 second. Somebody riff while I pull that up.
So Sandy, there was one of the questions, I think it said, I'll read it, requesting a positive comment. How would a new method have affected the truck transfer development on 123? I am trying to understand. And that was from Deb. I'm a little confused on the truck transfer development.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I follow that question. Deb, can you clarify what you mean by the truck transfer development? Are you talking about the Leonard Street Industrial Park? Oh, okay, Leonard Street Park. How would it have affected? Again, so it just instead of it going to a town meeting vote, it would have been a town council vote to discuss that change, that zoning. There was a zoning change that allowed that from residential to industrial. Correct? I think, Kevin, right? Is that right? And I think that, again, just instead of it going to a town meeting, it would go to a town council vote. Again, though, keeping in mind that those town council meetings would be open, just like people would come to a town meeting to express their opinions. Instead, they would go to a town council meeting to express their feelings about the about that zoning change and try to get the town council to hear their concerns about, or if they're, depending on if they're advocating or concerned about it, they could speak at the town council meetings about that. All right, and I think Laura put the YouTube link in there for you, Deb, to the YouTube channel for the Norton Media Center.
Anybody else? All right, I was going to say last chance, but it's really not your last chance. If you do have questions, we are available. You can find our page on the town website under Charter Commission. There's a email address. You can reach any of us individually, or you can just reach out to the group as a whole. We have answered every single question and happy to get back to you in a very timely manner if you do have any other follow-up questions. I'm going to just thank everybody for their time tonight. Really great discussions, really good questions tonight. I think, and I hope this was helpful for everybody. And just wanted to remind folks that the election is this Saturday, April 10th from 8 to 5 p.m. It will be held at the Norton Middle School. And we hope you come out and support the recommendations of the Charter Commission. And thank you on behalf of everybody. With that being said, I am going to ask for a motion to adjourn the.
Before you close, is that voting? Is that an open town, or is it like the presidential voting?
On Saturday?
Yes, ma'am.
It is a ballot vote. So if you'd like, if you can, somebody riff, I will find you
It is, yes, Saturday at the middle school from 8 to 5.
I'm going to try and find the ballot, and I'm going to post the ballot.
And this is question 1. So there's 2 questions, and there's several candidates for different elected seats on that ballot as well.
I found it. Oh, can I?
This ballot is there, and the questions actually are explained as well. So in case you forget which question is which, we have a nice explanation on question 1 that explains exactly what you're voting for, what a yes vote means, what so that you can see right then and there.
All I've got is a PDF of it. Sandy, do you know where to find the link? I have it downloaded. Is it on the town's website?
I'm sure it is.
Say that. I am not finding it, and I know
It's right there. It's undecided.
Somebody just posted it.
Okay, thank you. I was going to say, I know Lucia had posted it. The town clerk had posted it at one point. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. The chair will take a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Oh, second.
Thank you. All in favor? Please nod. Thank you. Okay. The Charter Commission information session of Tuesday, April 6th, 2021 is now ended. Thank you again for everybody for coming out, asking great questions, and we look forward to seeing you at the polls on Saturday. Take care, everybody.
Deb, it's going to be on the same channel that Laura linked.